have been doing it for so long. And I'm sure a lot of you could probably relate to that as well, no matter what subject matter you're shooting. But as I mentioned, I did have a couple things that I wanted to showcase first, and then I'll share my screen and show a couple of things, and then we can open it up to questions. I'm going to turn off my virtual background so you can actually see me a little bit better, and you're not going to get everything blurred out. So don't mind my boring blue wall and blue drapes. But
no,
where
I
do I
hope you
want to
don't
start?
mind, but I'm going to record this.
Yeah.
Because a couple of people asked for that.
Sure, that's no problem at all. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here, just kind of go through some of these pretty quickly. Jay, I can send you an email tomorrow at some point too with kind of links to this stuff if anybody's interested in it as well. So if you want to check it out yourself, make any purchases, I'll work up some specials for you guys as well. The first thing that I want to highlight is something that if you're on our email list, you've probably seen this before. It's this weird looking stool. We've been highlighting this a bunch. I always talk about it because I think it's something that everybody should have, no matter what style of photography you do. It's a very small collapsible stool, folds down to about probably 3 inches thick. It's about 1 foot in diameter, has a little strap on it as a carabiner. But what's cool about this is it accordions out to about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. So you actually have a stool to sit on while you're out shooting. If you're doing landscape, macro, wildlife, you can use it as a posing stool for portraiture. It just has unlimited uses for photography and also non-photography, and folds right back down. These are really great, weighs about probably 2 pounds, and I think it's something that everybody should have. They're fairly inexpensive. I think we've been running a sale on them since the holidays for like $35. They make great gifts, and I think it's something that everybody can benefit from just because of the versatility of it. I have one in my car that I just use typically for just camping, or if I'm going to the beach, or just something that I can utilize and something that I can sit on. Half the time I'm using it for non-photography related purposes. So there's a lot that you can actually do with that, which is fun. A couple other things that I'll showcase here. New LED lights. LED lights are getting more and more popular. I have a couple here I want to show off. I apologize for the glare. I'll put it a little bit closer here. So this is by LumaCube. This is their Panel Go. This is an updated light from them. What's cool about LumaCube is they're all Bluetooth compatible, so you can control this light from your phone via an app. It's about the size of a cell phone, maybe a little bit smaller. It'll come with this very white diffusion. Let me take this off so you can actually see it a little bit better. It'll come with a white diffusion, and then does also have a frosted glass covering. But I can power this on really quickly here if it wants to power on. It's very low brightness, but you can see that it also has a rear LCD readout, so you can see the time that you have left, your color temperature, your power setting. This one is also color temperature adjustable, so it's not RGB, so you can't change like green, blue, yellow, purple, orange, all the different colors, but it is standard Kelvin temperature adjustable. So between yellow and blue, it's actually between 3200 and 5600 Kelvin. So for portraiture, it makes a nice fill light, very easily power adjustable. You can see how bright it's actually getting. So it does get very bright. It has a great runtime. Right now, it's about halfway charged, and I'm on just the low power setting, which still gives off a good amount of light. And I have 8 hours of runtime on this before the battery dies. So really good battery life, very small form factor. I mean, compared to my phone here, it's a little bit smaller. So very small form factor, something you can throw in your bag, doing macro, portraiture, any video work. Just having a little bit of additional light is always nice. And then it does come with this silicone cover, which will make it, again, a little bit softer if you're going to be using it for portraiture. It does come with a adapter too, a hot shoe adapter, so you can actually put it on top of your camera to use it as a video light, or just as a kind of a front light for doing any portraiture. So that's a really cool LED light. But if you want something even smaller than that, you can go with one of these cubes. LumaCube does also make one of these. This is the one that's actually made by LitraTorch. You may be able to read right there if I put it the right way. Made by LitraTorch. Basically the same one as the LumaCube product. This is just one that I personally own and use quite often. These things weigh almost nothing. They're very rugged. You can go up to 30 feet deep in water with them, so they're waterproof. On a full charge, this has about 2 hours of runtime at the max power, so you get good battery life out of it as well. This is something that I just keep in my camera bag at all times. A lot of times I just need it if I'm out doing any night photography, just a little bit of a light to shine, just to kind of look in my bag. This can be really beneficial. These also will come with a hot shoe mount when you purchase them. It'll come with a little diffuser as well, just as the larger one did, but just a much smaller form factor. I mean, I can put it in my hand here and it completely disappears. So these are really cool as well. So just a couple of different lighting options. Another just kind of general accessory, which is kind of interesting, that we started carrying last year. You may get some reflection on this, but I'll try to put it a little bit closer. There we go. These are called tech wraps. These are pretty cool. They're similar to like a neoprene wrap. They're not quite as padded or as thick as those neoprene wraps. But what these have that those don't have is a shinier material on this end, which is weatherproof. So if you're out shooting and it starts raining out, you can wrap your camera up in this. I have my camera right here that I could just, again, just throw it over it, wrap it around, and it has a bungee cord, which you can actually elastic around it just to keep it safe from the elements if it starts raining out while you're out shooting. The inner material is actually microfiber, so you can use it as a lens cloth as well. And it just does add a little bit of protection to your gear. If you're carrying it around or you're traveling with your gear, it doesn't really weigh anything whatsoever, and just gives you a little bit more protection while you are out shooting, and acts as kind of a rain cover in a last minute situation. Not something that you can really shoot with while it's on, but if you're out shooting, you get caught in a rainstorm, you have this in your bag, you can throw it on and keep your camera protected. They come in two different sizes. This is the 12 by 12. They also do a 17 by 17. So this is the smaller one. If you have a little bit of a larger camera, that was an A7 Sony with a mid-range zoom on it. This is a little bit small for that. The next size up would be perfect. They don't have anything massive, so if you have any big telephoto lenses, they don't have anything quite that size yet. Maybe in the future they will, but this is just a cool product that we've started carrying within the past year. And then I know there was some talk about some macro stuff. So I did want to showcase one macro accessory that I was able to pull from the store, which is this focusing rail from Nissi. I'll also talk about some Nissi filters here in a couple of minutes when I share my screen. But this Nissi focusing rail is awesome. It is one of the best built focusing rails that I've seen. It is Arca Swiss compatible. You can use it by itself without a tripod, or you can also mount it onto a tripod. It does have a tripod socket right there on the bottom, but it does also have these feet. So you can just set it down on a table and loosen it up. Loosen it up here on one of these. There we go. There we go. It's not wanting to work there. Now it doesn't want to actually work. But you can loosen it up and slide it back and forth, or if you just want to make micro adjustments, you can use the knob here to do very micro adjustments. You do have a scale on either side, so if you really need to fine tune how much movement that you're actually doing, you can fine tune it and actually kind of mark it. It is Arca Swiss as well, so if you have an L bracket or anything, I can just drop my camera right into here. No problem at all if I actually loosened it up enough, but I can loosen this up all the way, drop my camera in here with the L bracket, tighten it back down, and you don't have to worry about ever forgetting a tripod plate, which will also bring me onto L brackets in the next stage. But I have my L bracket on here, clamped it right down onto it, and you're good to go. So it's compatible with any L bracket that you have or any Arca Swiss plate. If you use any Peak Design straps, those tend to have the Arca Swiss plates built into them. So if you're interested in doing any macro work, these are really cool. For the price, the build quality is really hard to beat. Very nicely machined aluminum. The mechanisms on it are very smooth. You can, again, take these feet off if you're not going to be using it on a table. So these feet will actually unthread, and you can mount it onto your tripod if you're going to be utilizing it that way as well. And just another great accessory if you're trying to experiment more with some macro, do any image stacking, or just really fine tune your focusing. These focusing rails are really fun. It will also come with an Arca Swiss plate. There is one in here inside the box. So if you don't have an Arca Swiss plate already, or if you're not using an L bracket, you will get one of those as well. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I will send Jay some links to this gear and equipment. So if you guys want to check it out after the fact, do any more research on it, make any purchases, I will send that all to you guys as well. And then going off of that, I was just talking about the L bracket on my camera. So this is one made by ProMaster, but a lot of other companies do make L brackets as well. The ProMaster one, for the price, is really hard to beat. These retail for like $60. And what's nice about L brackets is they're going to be specific to your camera model. There are some older camera models where you may not find a specific one just due to the age of it, but any current camera or any camera that's come out probably within the past 6 or 7 years, you're going to be able to find a designated L bracket for it where it's going to form fit your camera. It'll still give me access to my battery door here on the side, give me access to my doors here on the left-hand side to get all the different ports. So it's going to give you access to all of that without hindering it at all. And it is form fitting, so it's not going to slide around or move around. And if you're shooting on a tripod really at all, as long as it's an Arca Swiss tripod, having an L bracket is so beneficial. It's not something that I really ever take off my camera. It pretty much stays on at all times. And what's nice about that is I never have to worry about forgetting my tripod plate. And again, it does give me a tripod plate on the horizontal axis, or on the left side of the camera, so I can shoot vertically, I should say, so I can mount my camera directly above the tripod. I don't have to worry about angling it off the side and getting the weight kind of thrown off. It just makes it so much easier to use a head that way and really make your adjustments much easier than trying to drop it down into the notch of your ball head and really kind of limiting yourself how much room you have to move around. So L brackets are really great. I like the ProMaster ones because they're a lot cheaper than ones like Really Right Stuff or Kirk. Those tend to be pretty expensive, and honestly, at the end of the day, they're not that much different. I know ProMaster sometimes gets a bad rap of kind of being a cheaper quality accessory company, and some of their stuff, yes, is cheaper quality, but they also do have some really good quality stuff as well, and their L brackets are definitely one of them. So I highly recommend those. If you shoot on a tripod at all, I definitely recommend picking one up. It's been a game changer for me. You never have to worry about your tripod plate coming loose. You tighten this down just slightly. You don't even have to really wrench it down, and it's going to lock into place just because it's form fitting to your camera body. And while I'm on this, I'll touch upon mirrorless kind of quickly here. I do have a whole other separate program about mirrorless cameras, but I know there was some talk about it kind of early on. So I just kind of wanted to go a little bit deeper into that. So with me, I've been shooting with this Sony mirrorless camera. This is an A7R2. I've been shooting with this for a little over 3 years. I previously was shooting with Canon. I had a 5D Mark III and just did not want to carry around a camera system that big and that bulky, but still wanted the resolution and the image quality that that full frame sensor was giving me. And at the time, Sony was really the only company out producing any full frame mirrorless cameras. So that's what I switched to. Had I have waited till where we are now, I probably would have switched over to the R5 or maybe even the R6, depending if I needed that extra resolution or not. But at the time, that was kind of the only choice that I had if I wanted to stick with full frame, and I've been very satisfied with it. I'll probably end up upgrading it here when they come out with the next generation of the A7 IV or the A7 III, which will then be the A7 IV. The really only complaint I have about this one specifically, which they've addressed on the newer cameras, is the battery life. And that's kind of a big complaint that you're going to get across the board with mirrorless cameras, is the battery life is not quite as good as DSLRs. And that's mainly because of the electronic viewfinder on these cameras. That electronic viewfinder, believe it or not, takes more power away from your battery than your rear LCD screen does. So by using that viewfinder, you're drawing more power from the battery than if you were just using the rear LCD screen, which I know is kind of weird. But for whatever reason, just the power that it needs to power that up and the resolution that it's actually giving out does just eat up the battery life. And a lot of these mirrorless cameras have gotten much better at that. A lot of these cameras companies have done a very good job addressing it. But overall, mirrorless cameras definitely do not have as good as battery life as DSLRs do. But there's a lot of other advantages to them. You just may have to carry around an extra battery or two with you. Some of my favorite things about mirrorless are, one, the electronic viewfinder, which is huge. You get to see your image in real time, so you get an accurate representation of what your final image would actually look like before you take it. You can see your exposure, you can see your depth of field, you can check and make sure just everything looks correct before you even take the image. You don't have to worry about taking an image, reviewing it in the playback, checking to see where your exposure is, making adjustments, taking another image, and just kind of repeating that process until you get the proper exposure. Relying on the in-camera meter is not always 100% accurate, depending on the situation of light that you're photographing. So being able to actually see a preview of your image, no matter what settings that you're shooting in, is huge, especially in doing low light photography. Low light photography, trying to compose with a DSLR can be very difficult because you're only seeing the available light coming in through that lens. And if it's very dark out still, or early in the morning or late in the evening, you're probably not going to be able to see much through that viewfinder. But with the electronic viewfinder, you can adjust your settings so your exposure is going to be correct, and you're actually going to see that inside the viewfinder itself, which is huge. Another thing I like about these mirrorless cameras is the ability for them to have in-body stabilization. Now, not every single mirrorless camera is going to have in-body stabilization, but many of them do. A lot of the newer cameras coming out will give you in-body stabilization, which basically just means the sensor is the point in the camera that is being stabilized. So you'll actually see the sensor move around inside of an image stabilized camera. If you take the lens off and kind of shake the camera around a little bit, that sensor is going to move around inside of the camera, which is actually correcting for any shake or any movement that you may have. And some of these cameras have very good image stabilization. Cameras like the Olympus EM1 Mark III, that actually has up to 7.5 stops of image stabilization, which basically means you can make your shutter speed 7.5 stops longer than you would typically be able to shoot at handheld, and still get the same amount of sharpness and the same amount of clarity, which is awesome. So I've actually seen photographs taken with that camera handheld at 4 seconds that are tack sharp, and somebody handheld it for 4 seconds. I've heard that people have handheld them even longer than that and still gotten sharp images. But I've actually seen proof and seen images of a handheld image or a handheld photo at 4 seconds with that camera that doesn't have any movement in it whatsoever, which is really unbelievable. So in-body stabilization is another huge advantage that you're going to see in these mirrorless cameras that you're not going to get with DSLRs. And then probably the last biggest advantage for me was the adaptability. So one, if you're a Nikon or Canon shooter and you plan on switching over to their mirrorless system, you can utilize most of, if not all of the lenses that you own on the new mirrorless platform. There are some selective lenses that are not going to be fully compatible with the adapter, but a great majority of them are. So most likely all the lenses that you own for your Nikon or Canon are going to seamlessly adapt over to their mirrorless system and still be able to maintain autofocus, which is great. You're not going to see any slowdown in autofocus tracking or speed or accuracy. Image quality is going to be just as good, actually, if not better, because you're on a newer camera with a newer sensor. So you're going to get probably even better image quality. Really, the only downside is having that adapter itself. You do have to kind of work with that. It does add a little bit of size and a little bit of weight to the camera itself, but it is pretty minimal. Not a huge disadvantage, but just something that you kind of have to consider and have to work with. Another nice thing for me personally, when I switched over from Canon to Sony, that actually worked out really well. There's actually a couple of autofocus adapters out there to allow you to put Canon lenses on Sony cameras, which I really like. So I was able to still utilize all of my Canon lenses on my new camera when I first bought it and didn't have to go out and buy a bunch of brand new lenses. So that's another thing you could do as well. If you're a Canon shooter, that just gives you another option. Unfortunately for Nikon, there's not a lot of good autofocus adapters really at all, besides the Nikon one that they make for their mirrorless system. But if you have a Nikon lenses, you're probably not going to find any worth using autofocus adapters for anything like Sony or Fuji or Olympus or Panasonic. There's just really no good autofocus adapters out there, unfortunately.
No, a question on Nikon.
Sure.
Tamron, Sigma, those lenses, they will adapt to the mirrorless cameras too.
Many of them will. Both Tamron and Sigma. I have a full list of compatibility with the Nikon and Canon adapters. So you can just search, let's say, Sigma Nikon mirrorless compatibility or Tamron Nikon mirrorless compatibility. You're going to find a full chart of lenses that are compatible. Some of them may need to do a firmware update to be fully functional. Some of them are not going to be functional with autofocus. but most of their newer lenses, both Tamron and Sigma, are going to work with the adapter as well. And there's been talk about Tamron and Sigma coming out with lenses for the Nikon and Canon system too. They've started to come out with lenses for Sony mirrorless. Now I think the next step for them is to start doing some things with the new R series from Canon and the Z series from Nikon. So I think we will start to see some of those in the coming, I don't want to say coming months, but probably within a year. I would say we'll probably start to see some announcements of some mirrorless lenses for Nikon and Canon from both Sigma and Tamron as well. So there's going to be more and more options to choose from. That's one of the limiting factors right now with Canon and Nikon, is their lens selection for these mirrorless cameras is pretty limited. Both of them are trying to kind of speed up the production. I was reading something the other day that Canon's planning on releasing a bunch of new mirrorless lenses towards the end of this year. So there's a lot of stuff in the works, but really now there's not a ton of options for Nikon and Canon mirrorless lenses. Yes, you have the ability to adapt over DSLR lenses to them, but there are some limitations to that depending what the lens is. And typically these mirrorless lenses are going to be sharper than the DSLR equivalent. So you're just going to get better image quality out of these mirrorless lenses as well. I actually have a Tamron lens on this camera right now on my Sony. I've been loving the Tamron lenses for Sony. If they can do stuff like this for Nikon and Canon as well, I think it would be awesome. These lenses have been so great, and they're very affordable when you compare them to Sony equivalent. This is a 17 to 28 2.8, so it would be most comparable to the 16 to 35, and it's about the third of the price of the Sony 16 to 35 2.8, and probably about a third of the weight, honestly. That Sony to 16 to 35 is a big, heavy lens, and the image quality on this Tamron is still remarkable. I haven't had anything negative to say about it. It's been just a great lens for me. I also have their 28 to 200 as well for the Sony, so can't really speak highly enough of Tamron, especially for their mirrorless lenses. So I hope they're going to come out with something for Nikon and Canon at some point in the future as well. So there's a lot you can do with mirrorless. There's a lot of exciting things. There's a lot of new technology coming out into these cameras for video shooters. Mirrorless is a great platform for video. So there's a lot of really benefits that you're going to see from mirrorless. Not to say that everybody needs to make the switch over, but there are some advantages that are going to make it photography a little bit easier for you as far as finding your exposure with the electronic viewfinder, shooting in low light situations without a tripod. So there are some things that just make it a little bit easier and can sometimes be more enjoyable as well. So I do think mirrorless cameras are the future. I do definitely think that's where the industry is headed. I don't see a lot of these companies producing many new DSLRs between Nikon and Canon. I don't see them really coming out with any new DSLRs. Maybe a few more here or there, but if anything, they're probably going to be on the more entry level end. I think a lot of the higher end cameras they're going to work on focusing on now are going to be mirrorless, along with mirrorless lenses. That's another thing they need to kind of catch up on. But with the new release of the Nikon Z6 II and the Z7 II and the Canon R5 and the R6, their camera bodies are at a point now where they're able to kind of compete with everybody else and what they're doing. Now they just need to kind of ramp up their lens selection a little bit more. So mirrorless is great. I don't have any plans of going back to using a DSLR. But again, it's not something that you necessarily need to switch over to. There's definitely an expense to it, and sometimes that can be more depending which camera or lens system that you're using. And it's not always possible for everybody to make that switch over. And with that being said, DSLRs, again, are still very capable. You can produce great images with DSLRs. A mirrorless camera is not automatically going to make you take better photographs. It just may make some things a little bit easier in the long run. So that's just kind of a little bit about mirrorless, kind of a little kind of overview of what my program about mirrorless camera goes into, and just some of the basics and some of the main kind of things that you'll see. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and kind of showcase a few other things that I wanted to talk about. So I know I was showing off that Nissi focusing rail. Nissi is actually a filter company. That focusing rail was a new product they came out with last year, which has been doing very well. But primarily they're known for their filters. And Nissi has a whole crazy selection of filters. If I go over to the shop tab, these are all the different kind of filter types that you're going to find. I'm on their website because it's just a little bit easier to navigate the different types of filters than it is to navigate our website to try to find the different types of filters. But we stock their entire lineup, everything from their circular filters, their square filters. They have filters for drones. They have filters for mobile phones. They have filters for pretty much everything. They actually even came out with a lens this year. So they're doing a lot of really exciting things. But if you've been interested in picking up any filters, Nissi is going to have pretty much anything that you can think of or anything that you may need. What I like about them, especially, is they do these filter kits, and they're circular filter kits. So they're going to give you different filters based on different types of situations you may find yourself shooting. So a long exposure filter kit. They do a waterfall kit, which is going to give you like a polarizer and an ND filter. They just do a circular ND kit, which is going to give you a few different stop NDs. So you can save a little bit of money by buying some of these pre-packaged kits. They'll come with a little carrying bag as well. So I really like these. But you can also just buy them individually. They're really known for their square filters. They have a ton of square filters. They also do have square filter kits where they're going to come with multiple filters, different holders, different adapters. And again, you can also buy them individually. So they have a ton of information over here on their website. If you're into landscape photography, even kind of macro photography can utilize filters, polarizing filters, ND filters, or just clear protection filters, clear UV filters, I think can be utilized by everybody just to keep your lens from being damaged. If you're to drop your lens, you're banging up against something. The odds of both the filter and the lens breaking are pretty slim. Most likely just the filter is going to break. Working at hunts, I've seen many people bring lenses in where the filter is cracked. We're able to take it off for them, but the lens is completely fine. They throw a new filter on there and they're good to go. They avoid what could be a several $100 repair fee, if not more, and just replace it with a $30 to $50 filter, and they're on their way. So filters, especially protection filters, can definitely be a lifesaver. But if you want to go a little bit of a step further and kind of get some more filters that will change the actual scenery of your image, depending if you're looking for a neutral density to darken your image and slow down your shutter speed to kind of blur out water or blur out the sky, or if you're looking for a polarizing filter to cut down on glare and reflection, there's definitely a lot of benefits while utilizing filters. And Nissi has a lot of good information on their website as well, like which Nissi filter system is right for you. And then you can go to the Discover page. The Discover page is going to give you more information, more details about these different types of filters. So they have a lot of really good, useful information on this as well. Even a guide to using filters to their maximum potential. So you got a lot of good resources on Nissi's website about filters too. And I've been really happy with the quality of them. I've been using them a little bit for the past year, and I have nothing bad to say about them. And they also do cool things like that focusing rail. And then going off of that, another thing that I wanted to showcase was this filter specifically from Nissi, because somebody did mention kind of some macro, some close-up capable products. And a close-up filter is something that will thread on to any of your lenses, depending what size lens you have. They make different size filters, and it's going to allow you to focus much closer than you were able to do without that actually being on there. So it's going to allow you to magnify in much closer and actually do some kind of faux macro photographing, where again, the lens you're using isn't a true macro lens, but you can throw one of these filters on there and kind of not make believe, but kind of impersonate a macro lens and actually allow yourself to focus much closer than you'd be able to do otherwise. And you can swap them out between different lenses. This one will actually come with 2 different adapters. And these will, again, thread right onto the front of your lens. These are all hardened glass, but just allow you to focus much closer to your subject than you'd be able to do before. So this is one way to, again, focus closer without actually going out and buying a true macro lens. Another way to do that is with extension tubes. Going back to ProMaster, again, they're the company that made the L bracket that I'm utilizing. They also do make extension tube sets as well. So you can throw these in between your camera body and your lens. They make them for all the different mounts, the new Canon RF, the Nikon Z system, Canon EF, Fuji, Micro Four Thirds, Sony, Olympus, which is, again, Micro Four Thirds. They have them for all the different camera systems out there. And they typically come as a kit. So typically, the thicker the filter, the closer you're going to be able to get to your subject. You can even stack these and put 2 or 3 filters together to get even closer if you wanted to. So these are going to be really fun to play around with. They're going to give you autofocus capabilities as well. They'll communicate the autofocus, so you'll actually be able to autofocus with them as well. And these are going to sit between your camera and your lens. So one side will mount onto your camera body, the other side will mount down to the rear of your lens. So it's going to sit between them. You're not going to see any loss of image quality in these at all because there's no glass. It's just pulling the lens further away from your sensor, which is just allowing you to focus physically closer. So this is another option that you can look at if you want to do some macro photography, but you don't want to go out and spend a ton of money on a specific macro lens. This is a way for you to utilize the lenses that you already own and turn them into a fake macro lens, I guess you could say, and experiment with some macro to see if it's something that you really enjoy doing. And then maybe you want to take a step further and then actually go out and purchase a macro lens. And you can utilize these on macro lenses as well to get like basically right on top of your subject. So a lot of different uses for these extension tubes to get closer to your subject, no matter which camera system that you may be using. Going on to this interesting ball head. This is another new product that I kind of wanted to highlight and just kind of touch upon quickly. For those of you doing any wildlife photography, some of you may own a gimbal, a full-size gimbal head for some of your larger telephoto lenses to give you kind of very smooth and fluid motion, both panning and tilting. But you may also have a ball head. So if you're doing any landscape photography, you have that other head. This basically takes both a ball head and a gimbal head and combines them into one. It's a multi-ball system, so it's a silver ball, and then inside of that is a smaller black ball. The silver one, when it's fully loose, is going to give you full range of motion, just like any ball head will. It does have a notch cut out on the side, so you can drop it down and shoot vertically. But if you lock that silver ball down and level it out, it does have a little level here. Make sure that's completely level. Lock that down and then loosen up the inner black ball. That's just going to allow you to pan left and right and tilt up and down the same motion that you would have with a gimbal head, but in a much smaller and more compact form factor. And this is great if you're going to be doing a lot of traveling. You don't have to worry about carrying both heads, and it's a lot smaller, again, at the end of the day, where you don't have to carry around a full-size gimbal head, which takes up a lot of space and can sometimes be pretty bulky and heavy. This is going to combine both of those heads, a ball head and a gimbal head, into one. Yes, it's not the cheapest thing out there, but if you're going out to buy a designated ball head and a designated gimbal head, you're going to be spending several $100s as it is to get something of decent quality, if not even more than that. So this kind of takes both of those, puts them into one. You can minimize how much equipment you're carrying around with you and also cut down on weight as well. So if you do a lot of wildlife, if you're also into landscape and using a ball head for other styles of photography, this is really a great option to combine both of those together. And then two other more product categories that I want to touch on. Enduro is a company that's been around for quite some time. Some of you may own some Enduro products, whether it be a gimbal head or a tripod or a ball head. Enduro has a lot of products, but they just announced, or they told us as of recently, that they are basically combining with Benro and just renaming a lot of their products. So a lot of their products are still going to be available, but just rebranded under a different name. They're going to utilize Benro. Benro and Enduro are basically the same manufacturer, just different names for their products. They're just going to combine everything into one, just make it a little bit easier for the consumer. And because of that, they've kind of unloaded a lot of the Enduro inventory to make room for this newer inventory that they're bringing in. So we've gotten a ton of great deals and a bunch of promotions going on Enduro products. I'll send you guys some more information about it specifically. But this is one tripod that we brought in a bunch of. It is a great travel tripod. It's carbon fiber, very durable, supports up to 30 pounds, has an Arca Swiss ball head. It collapses down to 23 inches, so it's very small, can fit in a suitcase pretty easily, especially when you take the head off, but does also have a center column to extend a little bit taller. The normal retail price on this is typically around $555, but with the price that we brought them in for, we're selling them for like a fraction of that, closer to like $400. So you're getting a huge price savings on these tripods specifically, but also ball heads as well. This one's already marked down 30%. We have a bunch of ball heads from Enduro. So if you've been debating maybe picking up a new tripod or a new ball head, definitely send me an email. We have a ton of different Enduro stuff at really great prices. And really, it's kind of first come, first serve. Once that's gone, it's going to be gone. Those products will again be rebranded under a different name, under the Benro name, but the Enduro products are kind of going away within some time here, and we've been able to capture some great promotions and some great deals on them. I really couldn't recommend their products enough. I love their tripods. I've been using one of them for quite some time, along with a couple of other tripods that I have. As I mentioned, I have way too much photography gear. That kind of comes with the territory of working at a photo store. But again, Enduro, I couldn't recommend enough as far as the quality of them. And now the price point is going to be even better. They were already very reasonably priced for the quality, in my opinion, but they're going to be even better now just because of some of these closeout promotions that we have. So,
No,
yeah, go ahead.
I know I sent you over a couple questions. I'd like to go back to the individuals that submitted those and see if they have some clarification they might want to ask about.
Sure. Yeah, I know there was one person that I responded back to who was looking for some different lens selections, which I mentioned I was going to address with Jen just one-on-one because a little bit more of a specific question. The other person I know did talk about close-up filters, which I touched upon, and just kind of some macro accessories. But if anybody else who else sent you an email that I may have missed has any other specific questions, I'm more than happy to address those, Jay.
Okay, those are the two that I forwarded over.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check and make sure, like with the filters, was there any other questions from, I forget who submitted it, but
I forget the name off the top of my head. Let me see if I can pull it back up. I think it was Jan.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. That was great info on the website.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Of course. And then two other things I did just want to kind of highlight on quickly, then I'll pull out and stop sharing my screen and we can just kind of chat about some different things for however long you guys have questions for. Just two events that we have coming up that I wanted to highlight quickly that you guys may be interested in. One that's actually coming up this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We've partnered with the Space Coast Birding Festival to put on a virtual photography weekend, which I'm really excited about. We've brought on some amazing speakers. Cameron, who presented last week for you guys, will be on doing a program as well. Mike Moats and Charles Needle, two very well-known macro photographers. Mike Militia and Sean Carey, two great wildlife photographers. Bobby Lane and her partner Lee Veris are going to be talking about portraiture. Ian Plant and Joseph Roybal are two amazing landscape photographers. Joe and Marianne McDonald. We have a bunch of amazing presenters lined up for this weekend. So this is going to be a really exciting event. What's unique about this event and a lot of other virtual events we've done is all of the main programs are 2.5 hours long, and they each have two presenters on them. So you're going to get a lot more in-depth information about these different topics. Over half of the programs are birding and wildlife related. So if you're into bird photography or wildlife photography, there's a ton to check out. There's a full registration package, which will just give you access to all of those birding and wildlife programs. So those are going to be really exciting. Again, between wildlife, macro, landscape, even portraiture, there's a nice mix of programs in here, no matter what you may be interested in, and different registration options as well. We're also going to be doing some different panel discussions on both Friday and Saturday night. So you're going to get some kind of open panel discussions with some of the presenters who are going to be on this upcoming weekend. There'll be some different vendor sessions, some shorter 30-minute sessions as well. So you're going to get some exciting things. I'm actually doing my mirrorless camera program Saturday night. So if you guys wanted to learn more about mirrorless cameras, I'll be going more into detail about that Saturday night. The nice thing about the vendor programs is no matter what registration package you sign up for, you'll get access to those. So just need to sign up for one of the packages and you'll get access to all those as well. So that event's really exciting. I'll put a link for it down in the chat if you guys want to check that out. And then another one that we have coming up second weekend of April is the Out of Chicago Live event. We've been working with Out of Chicago for quite a number of years now, and they've actually started doing some virtual events. If you guys are into landscape at all, they are bringing on some of the best landscape photographers from around the country. Colleen Minnick, David Kingham, Mark Denny, Mike Fry, Nick Page, Sean Bagshaw. They're bringing on some amazing amazing landscape photographers, also some macro as well, Mike Moats. and Belmont will be presenting. So you're going to get some macro in there as well. So it's going to be a really nice mix of speakers and some very high caliber speakers, which we're really excited to be involved with. So I'll put a link down for this event in the chat as well for you guys if you want to check it out. That one is coming up in a couple of weeks here. But that was kind of everything that I kind of want to talk about and showcase. A lot of different types of gear and equipment, just kind of wanted to touch on different things. And I'm more than happy to address any other questions that you guys have about any other specific gear, anything that I talked about already, anything that I haven't talked about that you were curious on. No question is not accepted. I'll put it that way when it comes to gear and equipment. So I'm happy to address any other questions that you guys have. And I did just put the links for both of those events in the chat.
Questions, anyone?
Thinking.
No, is Nikon coming out with a Z mount for the 200, 500 type lens?
They have I think it's a 100 to 500 or 2 to 500 or no, actually, I think it's a 2 to 600 that they have rumored. Yeah, it's a 200 to 600. It's on their list of lenses, on their roadmap of lenses that will be coming out. So there is at some point a 2 to 600 millimeter coming out. They also have a 400 millimeter and a 600 millimeter prime on that roadmap, a 100 to 400 as well. So they have some longer lenses coming out. Hopefully by the end of I think by the end of 2022 is when they plan to have all those released. So still a little bit of time on some of them. Hoping by the end of the year, we'll see at least one lens longer than 200, because really the longest lens they have right now is 70 to 200. So hoping that we'll see that 100 to 400 or that 200 to 600 before the end of this year. So there is definitely some stuff in the works for Nikon on those longer lenses.
A comment, the 500 prime with the adapter works excellent on the
Yeah.
Z6
It does. Yeah, it does work very well. That 500 PF specifically is an amazing companion with the Z series mirrorless, especially because of the size and weight of it. It is so small and light just to begin with. Then when you pair it with these smaller and lighter weight mirrorless bodies, it just makes a great match.
Other questions, folks? Don't be shy.
On the Canon mirrorless, there's the 100 to 500.
Yes.
Can be used with an extender?
You can, yes. You can use it with both the 1.4 and the 2x extender. The 2x is probably going to limit you a little bit because you're going to be out at f11. So the 1.4 is typically what I recommend people to go with that 1 to 500. Everything I've heard about the 1 to 500 has been great. I haven't even been able to play with one yet, just because they've been on back order for so long. There still is a decent bit of a wait for that lens. They've just been really hard to come by. But everything that I've been hearing from the people who have gotten them so far have really been enjoying them. So that 100 to 500 from Canon is a really nice lens.
What's the f-stop range on that lens?
I believe it goes up to, let me just double check to be 100% sure, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. 4 to 5 points, or no, 4.5 to 7.1. Sorry. So it is kind of long. It is kind of slow on the long end at 7.1. So when you do throw 2x on there, you're going to be again around f16, f11, or f11, f16. So just try to avoid that. With the 1.4, it's going to give you a lot more room to work with.
So what with the 1.4, can you do the math for me?
1.4 is going to be like a 5.6 to, it's not going to be an f11, it's going to be between f8 and f11, because f7.1 is not really a true f-stop, so it's going to be between f8 and f11. So 5.6 between, at the wide end, it does switch over to 5.6 very quickly, and then over to 7.1. So once you jump up to about like 300 millimeters, I think you're already at 7.1. So that's going to put you up close to f11, but just slightly below it. Again, f7.1 is not a true f-stop. So you're kind of going to be right in between both f8 and f11.
So it's not going to bring me much better than what I have with the 1.4. on a 100 to 400?
Not much, no. Image quality and focusing performance will definitely be better. I will say that it's a little bit smaller than the 100 to 400 as well. But you're probably not going to see a huge improvement overall. It'll definitely be slightly sharper, edge to edge, and will probably focus a little bit quicker. But for the money, you're probably not going to see a huge improvement.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Noah,
Yeah.
Joanna Curley here. I tried the R5 with the 100 to 500, and it is significantly lighter than the 7D that I have with the 100 to 400 and 1.4 extender.
Yeah, it is. They did do a good job making it a lot smaller and lighter weight. I will say that.
I have a question about you talk about the Tamron lenses and how good they are, and I've heard lots of people praise them. And many of them are lighter, I understand. Why, and they're also less expensive. Why are the manufacturers' lenses always more expensive?
I think it's because they're more of a name brand lens, quote unquote. That they're charging more because it's a Canon lens designed by Canon for their Canon cameras. So I think just because of that, they are charging more for it. Tamron and Sigma can also make lenses for both Nikon and Canon, so they can profit more because they're making lenses for both mounts. So they're accessing both markets, Nikon and Canon, also now Sony, and they do a few Micro Four Thirds as well. So they're able to keep the cost down a little bit because of that. And I think Canon and Nikon again are banking on their name and charging a little bit more because of that. At the end of the day, are they going to be maybe slightly better, a comparable lens, say a 70 to 200 from Canon or Nikon compared to a Nikon or a Tamron or Sigma 70 to 200? It may be slightly better optically, but most people probably wouldn't notice it just with the naked eye, just looking at two images side by side. So at the end of the day, yeah, the glass may be slightly better in the Nikon and Canon branded lenses, but probably not enough to make a difference, and definitely not enough to justify the price difference in most cases.
Can I ask you a technical question,
Tim?
Sure. I've never used the Micro Four Thirds system. Can you, in layman's terms, and something that, photography for idiots here, compare Micro Four Thirds to full frame?
Sure. So a Micro Four Thirds sensor is exactly half the size of a full frame sensor. So theoretically, you're getting half the resolution because it's half the size. Typically, these Micro Four Thirds cameras are going to max out around 20 or so megapixels just because of that size limitation. They can't put more megapixels on that sensor. So you're going to typically see them max out at around 20 megapixels. So if you're somebody who needs the extra resolution, 40, 60 megapixels, even with some of these cameras, you're not going to get that natively with Micro Four Thirds. Some of the Micro Four Thirds cameras do have like built-in high resolution mode where they're going to take multiple images and kind of composite them together into a higher resolution file. So that's kind of a way around it, which is a whole other step altogether. But really the main reason I see people going to Micro Four Thirds, even sacrificing that slight bit of resolution, is the size and weight savings. Because of that smaller sensor, the cameras themselves are physically smaller, and the lenses that go along with them are physically smaller as well. In some cases by a pretty substantial amount, especially when you're talking about longer telephoto lenses. They have a 300 millimeter prime. Olympus has a 300 millimeter prime lens. That's probably around the size of a 70 to 200 full frame lens. That's an f4, but with a Micro Four Thirds size sensor, it's actually double that. So it's actually a 600 millimeter f4 equivalent. That's the size of a 70 to 200 for a full frame, where a 600 millimeter f4 for a full frame camera is massive. It's huge. It's heavy. They're very expensive. So you do get a good size and weight savings because of the smaller sensor size. you trade off a little bit of resolution, but that's not to say that you can't crop in, or not to say that you can't make big prints with that sensor size. There just are some limitations that you kind of have to work with. Some people probably aren't even going to realize those limitations because they're not doing anything with that file that's really going to make them noticeable. So other than that, low light shooting, they're not known for low light photography, so you don't see many people doing astro or night photography. If that's kind of their primary focus, typically they're using something full frame. Full frame sensor is just going to attract more light. So you see a lot more people using full frame kind of for astro and night sky work. But I see a lot of wildlife photographers, honestly, using Olympus specifically because of that size and weight savings. They don't have to worry about carrying around a full frame DSLR or even a full frame mirrorless system that's going to be much bigger and much heavier than a micro four thirds size mirrorless system.
And if there isn't a lineup of people asking questions, I just have one more.
Sure, yeah.
Does anyone else want to chime in first? Okay, I hear and I see written down that the R5 and R6 ISO limits are quite different. Who uses, and in what circumstance would you ever use the limit of ISO on the R6? Or the R5 for that matter?
You probably wouldn't. I don't know anybody who shoots at kind of the limit, the max limit on really any camera.
Just couldn't fathom what the point was.
I mean, I guess in some situations, I mean, maybe if you're a journalist or something and you just need to get the shot no matter the quality of it, and that's the only way you can do it, you have that advantage. Typically, the higher the range, the higher you're going to be able to shoot just in general and get more usable images. So upwards of like 12,000 ISO, you're still going to get somewhat usable images. Typically a camera that maybe will max out at like 12,000 ISO, shooting at 12,000 ISO is not going to be very good. So typically the higher they increase kind of the ISO capability, the higher you're just going to be able to shoot in general. But at the end of the day, you're probably not going to want to ever shoot with that maxed out. It's just going to look over pixelated, and just there's going to be so much noise that even using denoise and topaz or any noise reduction software that you may have is not going to clean it up really enough to make it usable. I guess you could say. I mean, you can probably still make out what the image is going to be, but typically the higher the range of the ISO, the higher you're just going to be able to shoot at more comfortably in general.
I shot this morning in low, it was very, very cloudy, and I was shooting a bird sitting still at 5,000 just to try the camera out.
Yep.
I had never gone above 800 on the 7D.
Yeah.
And that was pushing it.
Yeah.
So I was very impressed that there was actually an image available that was quite presentable at 5,000.
Yeah, very, very usable. Yeah, you can. I mean, you can even push it higher than that, and even just with a little bit of noise reduction, even at 6,400 or even up to 12,000 on that camera, you're just again a little bit of noise reduction will clean up a good majority of it and still get some usable images. So the low light performance on these cameras has gotten a lot better, especially when you compare it to the 7D, which was definitely not known for its low light shooting capabilities.
Thank you.
Of course.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Well, no, I'd like to thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And just if you're interested in bridge cameras in April, know it's going to come back. And the bridge cameras came up in several questions I received, again, because of weight. And they have expanded their capability, and it looks like that's continuing, at least from what I read. No, you can comment on that, but he will be back. And if you know anybody interested in bridge cameras, you'll be the person to answer the question.
Thanks, Jay.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Noah.
Thank you.
If you guys have any other questions, I'll send Jay some information about the things we talked about tonight to share with you guys. I'll put my email on there as well, so feel free to reach out to me anytime, and be happy to see you guys, or hope to see you guys again when I come back in April. If you need anything else in the meantime, feel free to reach out anytime.
I want to emphasize that, Noah, because I've known you and I've known Gary for several years. The business is built on service, and they are excellent about answering questions and leading you through decisions. Noah put up with me on the Z6 II for a couple months while I had my questions and trying to decide between going to a different vendor or staying with Nikon because of my investment in lenses. So don't be shy, send him email. He will respond, as will Gary or others from Hunts.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that.
Okay, have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks,
Noah,
everybody.
So
Yep.
much.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye.
bye-bye now.